Welcome to Sacred Magic. Violet is on a quest to bring sacredness back into our everyday experiences. Anyone can have an extraordinary life when they are able to tap into their sacred magic within. Violet and her guests will be sharing their divine passions, inspirations, and stories of connecting with their sacred magic. We are so happy you have joined us today. Let's get started with your host, the magical creator of Discover Your Spiritual Gifts, Vialet Rayne.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Sacred Magic Podcast. I'm your host, Vialet B Rayne, and my host today is Simi Ahuja. Dr. Simi Ahuja is a family physician, medical intuitive, and the author of Raising the Inner Child. With decades of experience in Western medicine and mind-body healing, she has become an alchemist of the soul, transforming symptoms into stories, pain into power, and confusion into clarity. She doesn't just treat the body, she listens deeply, playfully, and intuitively to the whole being. Her work honors the full human experience, shadow and light, mess and magic, logic and laughter. Her approach is grounded in joy, rooted in the belief that when all parts of us are seen, loved, and integrating, healing happens not through force, but through alchemy. So, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you on here.
Thank you for having me, Violet. This is such a treat and an honor.
I think I met you in May at Awkwardly Zen's Fair. I think it was in May of this year. So it was such a treat to have my booth next to yours and us to get to communicate, the weekend. So it was just great to make that connection. And we see each other at fairs. So it's nice to have you on the show.
Thank you. And yeah, it was lovely to be with you and just connect and sometimes, geek out on these things. It's fun to do that.
It is fun to do that. You talk a lot about alchemy. What is your perception of alchemy? What is alchemy and how does alchemy work?
That's a fascinating question because it's a difficult one to explain for me. But I will do my best to put it into words because, as you know, a lot of the spiritual stuff, it is hard to put it into words, and because what happens is, this power, the bigger power is so grand and we try to grasp it with a small mind, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where we tend to lose the essence of it sometimes, but let's see if we can unpack it a little bit. So to me, alchemy is you have something and you make something else out of it. And a simple example in our lives, and just using butter and ghee. So ghee is essentially clarified butter. So how do we make ghee out of butter? And being an Indian, this is an art that we practice for forever, right? So what we do is we take butter and we boil it gently. So what happens by the end of that process is all the protein and the sugars get burnt off, while the only thing that remains is pure fat, which is ghee. And that's alchemy. You've created something that was taking something that was impure, and you've created something that's pure.
I love that example, right? Because alchemy is that blend of science and spirituality. Back in the day when we had alchemists trying to turn metal to gold, you can tell I geek out on this too, because I teach sacred alchemy and the 7 steps of alchemy. So in our first step, we burn off everything that we want off of it. We add water to liquefy it. And so we start doing this and we take one piece of matter and we change it to another. But even in that time, as they talked about turning metal to gold, what they were really looking at is how do we rebirth ourselves into something new? How do we change ourselves from where we're at with our wounds, our pains, our fears, our shadows, into this beautiful light, this divine being of who we were meant to be, going back, because all of our experiences throughout our lifetimes kind of shift us in different ways form our personalities, our characteristics, but that core divine being of who we are is still there. And so how do we get back to that? And so I love your alchemy of the soul and really taking the person back to their divinity, or letting them see how divine they are or sacred that they are, because most people forget that we're sacred beings.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do forget. So it is a process of remembering from a place of when we're in our egoic self, which is our human self, and then how do we get from that self? And as I said, burning, but I want to get into that a little bit more. I'm not sure I would call it burning of the stuff, right? Burning of the ego, the anger, the resentment, the grievances, right? And then the purity of who we are, then we come to remember that as a soul.
Yes, absolutely. Well, the burning is really the fire. So if you think of the element of fire, it's our passion, our connection to the divine, which brings in the burning. But the alchemical steps are all about burning back to the ash, coming back to who we are, and then adding our emotions, our water, and really healing, because water is all about healing, to come into the alchemy of that change and process. Fire is our divinity, our divine connection, right? So it brings in that passion, intuition, determination, our connection to the divine. So I love that. You do a lot of work with the inner child. So talk to us about what is the inner child and how can working with our inner child really benefit us?
Well, the inner child it's a part of our soul that gets fragmented when we experience trauma. And a lot of people tend to think of trauma as something big, something, like a death of a parent, which I'm not saying it's not traumatic. And there's micro traumas that work in our life just as much in a big manner, meaning they tend to run our life until we become aware of it, conscious of it, and integrate that fragmented part of ourself back into our soul. And this inner child work, it's not new, and I think you would agree, right? I mean, from the ancient times, the shamans call it soul retrieval when we begin this integrative process, right? It's known as soul retrieval. Some people call it timeline work. My mentors called it orphan rescue and or fragmented work. So these are all parts of inner child, right? It's all the different names for the same work. It's the inner child work, or part of the fragmented soul, that we then begin to reclaim, so to speak.
Yeah, because when we're in that pain or trauma, in order to move through it, sometimes we push that piece of ourselves away, or we deny that piece, or we don't heal it, we ignore it. And so we just keep pushing all those elements away versus really healing and understanding.
Well, yes. And a lot of the times, if you're not in this world, the spiritual world, you may not even know about it, right? Like I have a good friend of mine who I just recently met about a year ago, and he's been doing work in different ways. And he goes, I've never heard of parts work. So it's fascinating to me that, it's common, yet not so common, I guess, where people haven't even heard about it. So it's good to be able to talk about it, to bring that awareness for especially those ones who've never heard about it. Having said that, this process, it takes a minute to learn. I mean, it's simple. I'm not saying it's difficult, but it has its tricks, it has its nuances, right? That unless you've gone through it, you may not recognize it at first sight, right? But as you work through it, it's a living, breathing, dynamic process, meaning it takes over you rather than you taking over it, and it'll show you where to go. All that is needed is a little bit of your willingness to dive into this work.
I love that. And I think the critical piece in any of this work is awareness. And what I mean by that is when you're triggered, when you get upset, when you get emotionally distraught, or any of that, do you ever stop and think about, am I really upset about this? Or is it rooted in something else that I've forgotten, that I've thought about that brings up this emotion to this level. I think everyone has had a moment in their life where I call them tantrums, or, this frustration or this big emotion that shows up. And later on, you're like, why did I get so upset? Like, that shit, normally that would have never even affected me. And today it is really, really, really upsetting me. Why? Why? That awareness is the first key, because then we start asking questions like, why would this upset me? Why is this coming up? What is my body and my emotions trying to tell me? Where is this rooted? And what we forget is when we were children, we didn't have as much control back then. So when things would happen, we would throw a fit or get really upset or have a tantrum because something was happening that we didn't understand or we didn't like, or we couldn't move through it. And then when somebody told us, stop behaving that way, stop acting that way. And then we bury this stuff really deep inside of us and we forget about it, that it bubbles up, continuously bubbling up until you really look at it and dissect it and really kind of step back. And that's the work. Awareness is key. Once you start seeing it, then you go, okay, I need some help. I need to figure out why, when this happens, I get so upset, right? It's like that little inner child within us throwing a tantrum again. And we're like, why? Why? Have you found that as well in your work?
Oh, absolutely. And I love how you simplify it in that way. Awareness is the first step, and that is a step like that'll take you down that slide, so to speak, into the inner world, right? And when you talk about the emotions bubbling up, and unless you become aware, you can't work through it. So I want to take it a step further, and that is that if you don't pay attention to that bubbling up, that's what turns into physical symptoms, you see. That's what creates an illness as well. So unless you become aware, it's going to continue to bubble up, and bubble up in what different forms in your physical body. And being a physician, I can tell you, I've seen miracles happen in my office. And all I simply do, and this is true of no matter what the disease has been, I help to bring the focus on the inner child who's wanting awareness, who wants to be heard, who wants to be seen, who wants to be loved. That's it. It is truly that simple, right? And awareness does all that, because when we bring our consciousness to something, we feel seen. Like if I'm crying and you can hold space for me, and you do hold space, for people. I know that you're wonderful at it, Violet. And when you can hold space for me in that moment, I feel seen, I feel heard. And all you're doing is you're helping me to become aware of that inner child, you see. And that's where the alchemy happens. That's when what tends to happen is when we become aware, the inner child sort of stops crying, and the way it cries is through either bringing up emotions or creating physical symptoms. And you will notice that your physical symptoms resolve without anything else. That is like such a potent and a powerful, magical, alchemical thing that we can do for ourselves, is awareness.
Yeah, healing all the stuff that we carry. If we only could clearly understand how much baggage all of us carry, not only from our childhood and ourselves, but our ancestors and all of that we carry, where something's happened and we just have held on to it. Each time we release these layers, whatever these layers are, and we heal them, we get lighter and lighter and lighter. And our body is so magical. It can really do lots of things when we support it and really listen to it. And I think that awareness is so critical. You also talk about, and I know
Yes.
you have a book too, the author of Raising the Inner Child. So if you get an opportunity, definitely check out her book that she has, because I remember seeing it on your table. You were really promoting it, right? And we'll have her website at the bottom so you can always go and check out some of these things. But you talk about sacred sexuality. What is sacred sexuality? What does that mean?
That's a beautiful question. Sexuality, it's pleasure, right? And when we can feed so what happens is when we feel traumatized, when we get traumatized, our heart is broken. And when we delve into, in a way, because we have all different kinds of tools, right? We have like adult play, as an adult playgrounds, like literal playgrounds. I've seen those around where adult people, like senior citizens, and even me, adult like me, I can go in that swing and just open my heart up and go into that pleasure. So our sexuality is also a way that we receive pleasure. But unfortunately, because of the dogmas and the adulteration and the bastardization of our sexuality, we don't perceive it as that. We don't perceive it as something that is joyful. And it brings, so if we can allow it, when that sexual energy moves up to our heart, it brings so much joy to our heart that it can heal any illness. And it's interesting, as you were talking, my guides were telling me to mention this, that it's truly the joy frequency that heals us. So if we can remain in that state of joy, regardless of what's happening around us, that's when we begin to heal at every level: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. The problem is with the sexual stuff is that we've created so much dogma and taboo around it, right? We call it dirty, we call it bad. I mean, being sexually abused, and being a part of I was sex trafficked as a child, and I mentioned that in my book. I can tell you that I didn't even want to have sex for 6 years. There was no desire, there was no seeking for it, nothing. And then to have gone from that to actually feeling the pleasure that we are meant to derive from it, instead of shutting it down and suppressing it, is one of the greatest healing tools available that we have at our fingertips. But we've restricted it, right? We've given names to it. And so when we can truly look at it as a part of ourselves, that's sacred, because we are sacred. We cannot begin to even evolve. We cannot begin to awaken. We cannot begin to ascend. We cannot begin to be enlightened and self-realized until we first own that part of ourselves. And it's really fascinating throughout my journey what I have realized, that in the ancient times, the healers and the sages, they used to talk about this, that the most important organ in your body is your heart. And what I've come to realize is that it's the brokenheartedness that causes an illness. Now, modern science tells you, oh, your brain might be more important because it's neurological, gut. I mean, there's several arguments. And having read all of that, being in that Western world of medicine for decades, now I've come back to the heart. I say heart is the most important organ in the body. And as long as we can remain in that state of joy and use that sexual energy to bring us joy, all bets are off. Like, we would literally start healing overnight if we can just allow that energy to circulate throughout our body and truly feel the joy and the pleasure without the dogmas that are associated. That's what makes me so passionate about our sexual energy and the healing that we can derive from it.
I love that. I love that, because it's a part of ourselves. When you look at excuse me, spirituality, we talk a lot about Kundalini energy and activating your Kundalini, which is all about that sacred sexual energy moving, which opens our chakras, which really brings in that life force energy throughout our body, which helps us be at our best at all times. And so all of it works together when we can be in that healthy space. It helps all of us when we can heal all those parts of ourselves. So talk to us.
And
go ahead.
No, go ahead and ask your question.
No, share with us what you wanted to share. I was going to ask you what are some of the things that you offer, but finish out here. We have this little delay, and we're both waiting for each other to pause. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Absolutely. What I wanted to say is I wanted to just circle back and connect it for our audience is that when we experience trauma, and again, trauma doesn't have to be anything big. It happens in the small moments of our lives. And when we experience that, it leads to brokenheartedness. That's when our heart is broken. And so sexual energy is one of the ways that we can begin to heal our hearts, actually. So that's what I wanted. I wanted to just come full circle and tie that for our audience.
No, I love that. I love that. I've always said for many years, when somebody has a heart attack, go back about 5, 6 years. When did their heart get broken? So when we say I have a broken heart, or that broke my heart, or that really hurt my heart, it really does affect us in the physical. It actually starts building and coming in. It really does happen that way. If we think of Louise Hay, that did so many studies about illness and how it shows up, what we're saying to ourselves, what we're putting out there, what we're thinking can really affect the organs within our body and bring in that illness, right? And so it all aligns the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your knees are
Yes.
about moving forward. Your hips are about movement. Every piece has some piece to how you emotionally feel and what you're thinking. They're both really, really connected. And your heart is your generator. It is the one with the powerful energy that's generating your reality in your physical body. So it all works together. So I love putting those pieces together.
110%. I cannot argue with that.
So share with us some of the things that you offer, because I'll have your website at the bottom of the video and in the description. But if somebody wanted to come and work with you or find your book, just share a little bit of how we can connect with you.
Oh, thank you for this opportunity, Violet. Our website is sourceplay.life. And we offer few offerings on there. We can do one-on work together. We also offer to kind of work with you in a close, intimate way, in a way that we see your patterns. And I do this with my healing partner, Eric, as well. And all the information is on our website. So you can either work with one of us or both of us, because we each have different gifts that we bring forward. And sometimes, and it's all guided. Like, we will ask the guides what's needed. Do we need to work one-on-one, two-on-one, or one-on-two, or however it needs to happen. And this is all done on minimum suggested donations. The spirit guides will look into how much energy will be exchanged, how much energy needs to be exchanged, how much you can afford, and how much is being taken from our energy, right? Based on that, they will come up with an amount. So we really don't have a set amount. So don't let finances deter you, because it's all guided, and they know how much you can afford, and how much we need to give, right? And they come up with a balance, so there's not an energetic imbalance between us. So we would love to work with you in that setting. We, like I said, we can just do one-on-one settings, and we do deeper dives, meaning help you look at your patterns that you may not be otherwise aware of, right? We all have blind spots, and that's one thing that we're good at as a team, and even as individuals in our organization, is that to help you see your blind spots so you can begin to have more health. And health, when I talk about health, we don't talk about just finances or physical health. We talk about abundance of harmony in your heart, right? That joy in your heart. I think that joy is the most important currency, and we help you find your joy spot.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time today. We kind of had a mix up. She thought we were meeting in person, so she was very kind to accommodate, and we have her in her car, but that's cool. We got to chat with her and talk with her today, so I'm very excited that we got to connect today. So thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you, Violet. And I love it. It says organic as it gets, and I'm all about organic. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for watching. If you're listening or watching, please make sure you like or comment. Follow us on your favorite channels. We'd love to see you in the future. I wish you a sacred and magical week, and I hope that we will see you again back here soon on one of your favorite channels. Have a great week.
Thank you for joining us. To find out more about Vialet, head over to discoveryourspiritualgifts.com. You can also send a personal message to Vialet through email, violet@discoveryourspiritualgifts.com. If you love the show, subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. Until next time, remember, we are meant to have abundant and joyful lives. We hope to see you soon at Discover Your Spiritual Gifts.